Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Monday, May 8th, 2017 edition of VR News. You can see things are getting pretty bare behind me here. A little sad, but in a few weeks, I will be set up on the flip side. Can't wait. So let's jump into news. Start with the game Eye in the Sky. Touched on this a few days ago. We've got some updates on it, namely that it's going to be asymmetrical. If you're thinking right now, what the hell does that mean, Epix? Let me explain. So if you've played Panoptic, that is an asymmetrical game. That one's a multiplayer one, unlike this one, which is co-op. And the idea behind the asymmetrical game is that you've got one person per usual with the HMD on their head. They're in the VR gamer experience. And then you have, instead of passive onlookers, because let's face it, to date, VR is pretty much about the one person actually doing VR and then the others just viewing on a screen. Again, that's where this comes in. You've got other players, your buddies, that can man the mouse and keyboard and cooperate with you to solve those puzzles. Now, how that worked in Panoptic is you were adversaries. So you had the person in VR trying to escape this building, complex, compound. And then you had the other person who was manning the mouse and keyboard, heading the security systems and the droids, etc., to capture that person. Well, like I said, this one is cooperative. So you've got both trying to solve puzzles, which according to Alex Terziev, who's the art director at Vinlia Games, the puzzles heavily inspired by Portal. He's right up front about that. And I think that's pretty good because I love me some Portal puzzles. Now, he says that was their main inspiration and just frustrated with having to sit on the couch while one person played the game. So I think that is a real advantage to the asymmetrical and really opens up the type of cooperative and multiplayer gaming you can do. Because I really like the descriptions of these. They just sound really original and unique. He goes on to say, my friend showed me the prototype they were working on of the game and he immediately jumped on it as an opportunity. And this is where he ties it into Portal. You can, of course, picture the influence that Portal had on us. It's had its influence on all modern 3D puzzlers. But he wanted to take it a step further by playing around with things like the physicality of room sizes, room scale locomotion, lighting, and an art style that, according to him, was basically homage to the 70s and 80s science fiction art that he was obsessed with. Now, it's available on Steam in early access, $14.99. Unfortunately, as of right now, only available on the HTC Vive. So hopefully that's not a long-term exclusive, and we get to see that on the Rift as well. Hell, on the PlayStation VR as well. Next story, Indie Film Festival Raindance launching virtual reality awards. Now, I think this is great. They've been around forever. We've seen a couple of other festivals do the same thing. My only concern is not only are they jumping into this feet first, but they are really jumping into this. Get a load of these categories. So entries currently open just like any submission for the festival. But the categories for VR alone, interactive narrative, mobile interactive, cinematic narrative, documentary, music, animation, branded, not sure what the hell that is, sensual, I can guess, social impact, and sound design. This being their first, again, I can't help but think that's just probably a little too ambitious. Not sure how many entries they're going to get, but with that many categories, you might have some categories that are really, really underrepresented. And how valid are those awards then? That would be my main question. Now, the festival itself takes place September 20th through to and including October 1st. I guess we'll have our answer when that rolls around and the winners for those categories are announced. Now, they did also mention they're going to have a virtual reality arcade there, so that'll be pretty cool. Those attending the festival will get a flavor for virtual reality, so when those awards are presented for VR, they'll have a clue on what the hell VR is all about. Very cool. Next news story, Marvel Games promising absolutely amazing things in VR that will make fans go quote-unquote crazy. They actually said that. That, according to Jay Ong, he is the Senior Vice President of Games and Innovation at Marvel Studios. His words, absolutely expect some announcements in VR. That's something we're really excited about. I think our fans are going to go crazy. The things we are doing are absolutely amazing. He says the company had done a lot of deep diving, really looked into virtual reality and what they could do with it, and were immediately impressed. He has not said when we can expect VR content, but he did at least acknowledge that the upcoming games, Spider-Man and Avengers, would not feature VR content. So he said they're working on it, but with those two games not having any VR, my guess would be it's still pretty early days, and hopefully within a year or two, we see some results. Now, I don't get my hopes up on that personally. I think the last video game superhero tie-in, except of course the superhero massively multiplayer online games, but actual single-player games would have to be Batman, NES, Sunsoft. That's how far back we're going. So, not holding my breath, but still, we'll give it a fair shake. All right. Next up, Nvidia's VRWorks, getting all kinds of cool audio features and 360-degree features. Now, the audio feature that they're talking about, and Nvidia is currently hosting a GPU conference, they're calling it physically based audio. And it's basically a simulation of virtual sounds in a virtual environment that includes both directional audio and audio interactions with scene geometry and materials. And that last part is key to what they're offering. Think of it almost as kind of like a ray casting for audio instead of graphics. In fact, that's probably a good analogy because like Wolfenstein, which used the ray sort of a ray casting method, it's still early days for the audio side of virtual reality. So how it works, it attributes the size, shape, and contents of the surrounding environment when it generates the audio. And it's using what they're calling OptiX, which is the ray tracing tech behind it. And it basically assesses the environments in real time. So it's kind of like those cheesy effects that every sound car driver had in the 90s, where you could get orchestral, concert, different types of audio effects, except it's doing it much more realistically because it takes into account not just the fact that, okay, look, you might be in a concert hall and it's going to get echoey, but how that specific concert hall is configured. If there's a lot of fabric, you're not going to get quite the same echo, all of that kind of stuff. So you can see happening in real time, that is going to be computationally very, very intense. But today's GPUs definitely up to the task. So very cool. They have already added, or integrated rather, that audio SDK for this into the Unreal 4 engine. No word on Unity. I would imagine they're going to get to that as well. The other feature that they're talking about is 360-degree video SDK for the stitching. So 4K capture and the stitching together of that. To do that at 4K, listen to these specs. You will need 2 Quadro P6000 GPUs to do that. And we're going to kind of touch on something similar in a bit. Now, hopefully we hear some more. They're hosting this conference towards the end of the week. The next story, also NVIDIA, ties in almost directly with the last story. They've got one PC at this conference that they're demoing that is able to power 4 Vives, 4 multi-user VR collaboration. But here's what you need, guys. As impossible as it sounds, the box houses 4 Quadro P6000 GPUs, and it's linked, or rather they are linked to 4 HTC Vive Business Edition headsets, Each Quadro also running a virtual machine on a server, allowing each VR user to act independently. So you can see a lot of horsepower for making that happen. Now, this isn't going to be a consumer solution. What they're targeting is arcades or theater-style experiences, conferences, etc. Next story, VirZOOM, who we talked about several times. The last was the fella who lost 50 pounds, the marketing guy, forget his name at the moment. They have partnered with AMD to bring VR fitness bikes to basically locations worldwide. And they're also looking at connecting to cardio equipment outside of course, their proprietary bike. Now, if they can make that happen, it's going to be pretty impressive. They would be able to roll this out literally to all kinds of fitness studios. Now, probably not immediate, but you got to think, if they can sell it, start updating the cardio equipment that they're carrying, sky's the limit. Doesn't have to necessarily be bikes. Hell, they could make a Stairmaster style game or whatever. So very cool. That partnership should go a long ways. Now this next story, a little bit iffy on the statistics, but I thought I would throw it in. It's impressive if it comes to pass. And what I'm talking about is an estimate that suggests Samsung is approaching 10 million GearVR sold by 2018. Now, these stats are from IHS, and I will say up front, these are also the same guys who didn't have the best estimates last go around in 2016, so take it with a big old pinch of salt. But according to them, the 2016 sales of 4.56 million, they won't reach that target. Instead, they're going to hit slightly less, 4.16. So that's a difference of almost 10% that sales would be down from last year. Now, to be fair, that's probably not a bad estimate. I would hope it would be higher. But again, based on last year, they probably didn't want to go down that same path, estimation-wise. All right, guys, that is it for Monday's news. Tuesday, tomorrow, all this freedom. It is absolutely awesome, except for the packing stuff. Guys, have a great Monday night, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.